Hello folks, I'm Alex. This is Alex Unabridged, and these are my thoughts on The Girl Who Broke the Sea by A. Connors. So welcome back to the channel if that is the case. Yes, time for episode 2 of Science Fiction for the Somewhat Hesitant, book 2 in the YA Starter Pack is what I'm calling this little section. This is to ease me in to some sci-fi before we hit some of the harder classic stuff in February. So this is number 2. This is The Girl Who Broke the Sea. By A. Connors, and that's Adam Connors. Just my thoughts really on this today. So in this, we meet Lily, a 16-year-old girl who at the time we meet her is just about to descend in a submersible to a deep-sea mining rig called Deep Haven. It's a new start for Lily and her mum. Lily's somewhat of a troubled teenager. She's been kicked out of school after an incident that we learn about later on. And her mum's been offered a new job as a scientist on the aforementioned cutting-edge mining rig. Lily has agreed to go with her mum for this fresh start, but instantly regrets her decision, not only because of the fear of going that deep down in the ocean and all of the perils that brings with it, but also because the mining rig itself isn't exactly homey. And she struggles to connect with the other kids who are living down there as well. But the mysterious disappearance of her mum's new boss, as well as the hostile attitude and nefarious intentions of the mining rig's overall boss, Carter, make her want to stay. Plus, there's something else down there. Something out in the deep, deep ocean. Something trying to communicate with Lily. And as things get weirder and Lily struggles to deal with her own problems, she's drawn into a thrilling and perilous adventure of discovery and survival 3 miles deep in the Pacific Ocean. So there you go, that's a bit of a tease for what it's about. So what did I think then? The short verdict. This was really good. In fact, I'm surprised that I haven't seen more about this as kind of a YA adventure sci-fi book. It's got a really interesting and well thought out protagonist in Lily. The story is told from her perspective, and it's got a good supporting cast of other characters as well. The atmosphere is really effective. It's definitely exciting stuff, particularly in the latter half. There was one slight drop in pace, but otherwise it moved pretty fast and was definitely engaging. And it deals with quite a lot of important stuff in terms of themes as well, especially regarding emotions, handling emotions, self-confidence, fitting in, things like that. A couple of the action sequences felt a little bit muddy. That's just one of the kind of the niggles I had. In terms of description, I think, and there was one bit that felt maybe a little far-fetched, but other than that, it was well written and conceived. So that's in a nutshell what I thought. Very good. So let's go into a little bit more details then, where I'll break it down into various elements of storycraft, if you like, storytelling, and have a little look at those in more detail. So let's start off with character then. Yes, Lily's a really interesting character for the protagonist. As I say, we're told the story from her perspective, so we do actually really get inside her mind. And I could certainly empathise with her. She's got a lot going on. Her parents have reasonably recently split up, and although they both, obviously love her, they are difficult people to connect with. And in fact, that's one reason why they've split up. That they weren't connecting to one another particularly either. Their communication skills leave something to be desired, shall we say. Lily herself is an outsider. She finds connecting with other kids difficult, and she's pretty socially awkward. She says the wrong thing at the wrong time, things like that. She finds computers and machines a lot easier to deal with, particularly interfaces to computer software. She takes after her dad with that, who is a kind of a designer, an engineer of the interfaces for computer software. She's an emotionally raw character. She struggles with handling her emotions a lot, and tries to keep them pushed down and not really think or talk about them. I've got a quote to illustrate that. I have a lot of things in my head that I'm not keen to think about. Things that sit like great ugly spiders inside my brain. I push them down and down, and I used to think that was enough to be rid of them, but it doesn't work. They dwell inside you. They leak out. So yeah, bottling stuff up never ends well, does it? And for Lily, this bottling up of emotion leads to an urge to break things. Her behaviour is quite destructive. I've got another passage that I particularly like that I related to, where Lily explains what it's like when the negative emotions kind of overwhelm her. I was starting to feel fidgety, breathless. This feeling, at least, was familiar. The feeling that could lead to smashed cups and broken forks, and oh, so much worse. The feeling that it's like standing on the edge of a cliff and knowing that you're going to jump even if you don't want to. Like there's a cage of monkeys right in the centre of your chest, howling to be let out. For me, it's bees, not monkeys. But I know that feeling. I definitely know that feeling. And so, yeah, so someone who breaks things as a kind of a way to deal with things probably isn't the best person to have on a rather precarious deep sea mining rig. But Lily does know that she is aware of this, and the battle with her demons is a big part of the story and a big part of her character arc, and it's really well explored, actually. Despite her deep-rooted problems and the strange and somewhat ominous place that she finds herself in, she's also got a great sense of humour, and that really comes across in the book. She's very dry, I'd say, and it's slightly kooky in her humour, but it works really well. So the rest of the characters, the supporting cast, they're a varied bunch. There's a lot of different sorts of characters. And although the focus is very much on Lily, they feel well enough developed. They're sometimes maybe a little bit archetypal. And Carter, who is the main antagonist, is somewhat of a kind of stereotypical kind of corporate type villain. But they're all entertaining, and they play an important part in the story and in Lily's evolution and discovery of where she fits in. Lily is very much the focus of this story, in terms of human characters. But as I say, the others are well-rounded enough and varied enough and entertaining enough, definitely, to give a sense of richness to the world, essentially, and to the story. They all behaved consistently with their motives, etc. There weren't any glaring kind of inconsistencies or anything like that in it. And their motives were all very clear. So they were very clear, well-written characters in that respect. The other character in the book is this kind of life form at the bottom of the ocean. I'm not going to say much about it because that would be quite a big spoiler. But it was definitely intriguing. It made for fascinating exploration of concepts like consciousness and the philosophy around that concept. And it mirrored Lily and her exploration of her emotional volatility really well. And I really enjoyed that the interactions between Lily and this entity. My score for character is a 7 out of 10, which is good. So on to atmosphere and world building then. So the setting, the deep sea mining rig, is really well described, actually, and I got a really clear sense of not only what the mining rig looked like, but also a sense of what it really felt like to be there. It's kind of, it comes across as utilitarian, a little bit rough around the edges, a bit DIY, which is not what Lily expects for a kind of a cutting edge mining rig. There's definitely a sense of claustrophobia throughout the novel, and a sense of this kind of maze-like structure that's confusing to navigate. There's a sense that it feels maybe a little too flimsy for a structure that's sitting beneath a column of water that's weighs about 5,000 tons in terms of its pressure. I've got a description here of when Lily and a group of newbies to the rig are on a tour, and they first enter the cafeteria, and I think this is a good illustration of description within it, and kind of that sense, giving me a sense of what the place is like. The corridor opened out into a larger space filled with long tables and velour seating, big enough for 30 or 40 people to hang out in. Another row of domed portholes studded the far wall, but I could see nothing through them except more silty greyness. The ceiling was low, the colour of old newspapers. There was a self-service food counter on the left, and a row of ancient-looking arcade machines on the right. Looking around, I was struck by how weird it was that we should find ourselves in this place. On the one hand, we were utterly alone, surrounded on all sides by nothing but rocks and a mountain of water that wanted to kill us. On the other hand, it looked like we'd just stopped off at a motorway service station on the M40. That reference might be a little bit lost on those who aren't from the UK, but for me, that perfectly conjures up both an image and a feeling of what that place is like. So from the actual rig, the different rooms and sections of the actual rig, to the deep ocean exploration in strange kind of pod-like submersibles, and the other science fiction tech elements of the story, I think the atmosphere and the kind of the world building, the immersion is done pretty effectively. So my score for atmosphere and world building is 7 out of 10 again. So that's another good. Okay, writing then. So style-wise, I really enjoyed Connor's style. It's pretty straightforward and punchy. It's got plenty of, as I say, dry humour, quite offbeat humour from Lily, and some great silliness, sort of silly humour from other characters. It's got a really good flow to it. It's easy to read and digest. The dialogue, especially for the teenage characters, feels pretty accurate. Connors doesn't try to be too hip or teenagery, but it's peppered with word choices and phrases and things like that are age appropriate for each character, both the teenagers and the adults on board the rig. As I say, it's in Lily's voice, which is very clear, and as I say, kind of feels right for her age, but also not overly Connors hasn't tried to overdo it in terms of a typical teenager voice. It feels right for that character most definitely. The descriptive writing was generally very good, particularly for the setting, as I've already mentioned. A couple of the action sequences, one in particular, felt a little unclear, as I said in my kind of short thoughts at the beginning. I had a little bit of trouble picturing kind of what was happening, how things looked, because it was quite chaotic, but that might just be me. But yeah, that was the only bit really that I kind of sort of felt was a little bit unclear. In terms of the actual kind of language use, there's some great use of things like alliteration, sort of language devices. Alliteration is something that I am particularly partial to. In fact, I probably could be called alliteration happy when it comes to my own writing. But, I've just got one example here of something that Collins uses. Clanging and clambering through the claustrophobic corridors. I love stuff like that. So yeah, some really nice alliteration. And there's some fantastic similes, some really amusing similes. In fact, there's too many to call out in here. It's one thing that I think Connors does really well. And gives you a real sense of Lily's character through it as well. But I'll give you a couple of examples that made me chuckle. So the first one is, Mum's shriek sounded like a whale that had fallen into a blender. I really like that. And then this one, speaking about Carter, the villainous boss. He looked both happy and mean at the same time, like he was eating a piece of cake he knew belonged to someone else. It's like, yeah, I think we can all imagine, you can easily imagine that kind of person and that kind of look, can't you? So yeah, there's so many great humorous similes in there, and not just humorous, but kind of evocative stuff when you get into the slightly more serious or thrilling or spooky stuff or whatever you want to call it. Really, really good use of language, really accessible stuff. So my score for the writing is an 8 out of 10. I thought it was great. Okay, plot then. It was a really engaging and intriguing story. Lily's own personal story is spread kind of throughout the first 3/4, I guess, maybe the first half, in terms of kind of her backstory is kind of spread out through that. As she kind of talks about her past through memories that come to her in times of stress or in dreams. And also there are chapters which are more about Lily's past, and she's talking kind of you through a memory, and then it goes back into the present of the rig, what's happening on the rig. And the plot of what's kind of happening on the rig as well is well thought out. The information's delivered in such a way that it creates a kind of a continued suspense along the way. The level of complexity here, I think, is just about right. There's plenty of intrigue. There's plenty of moving parts to the story, but it never felt overdeveloped or overwritten, or like Connors was trying to pack too much into it. I think it's actually pretty focused, and that works really well for it. The length and the pacing is good on the whole, with just, as I say, there's one little drop off in the first half for me. But it wasn't long. And I just felt like at that point, I just wanted it to move along a little quicker. But at no point did it stop being engaging at all. The reveal of what this entity life form is and its behaviour is definitely satisfying. It's believable. It felt credible. And it felt different and unique. It's there's stuff that I know of like it in terms of movies and stuff like that, but the way in which it was worked into the story and things like that was very good, and it felt very specific to this story. It worked really well. The story on the whole it felt unique. Couldn't see really many plot holes or inconsistencies, anything like that. Everything hung together pretty well. I suppose that there's one bit, maybe, where a survival suit, is what it's called, was introduced that was maybe a little bit convenient in its timing, and also a little bit far-fetched on the tech side of things with it. But I have to say it's handled in a very tongue-in-cheek sort of way, and is highly amusing at certain points. So I kind of forgive it that. I think Connors wrote it and kind of knew that it was just a bit bonkers, but it works. Do you know what I mean? To start with, I kind of laughed at it and thought, oh, that's a bit much. But the way it was handled just made it entertaining, so I don't mind too much. The score, my score for plot is 7 out of 10. So that's another good. Okay, ideas then. Ideas and concepts. So I picked this up on the basis that I just really liked the concept, I liked the premise. It was a freebie, I think, on Amazon First Reads, where you get to pick a book for free essentially each month out of one of their selections. I think it was that I got it through, and I was just intrigued by the overall premise. I didn't know really, kind of not heard of the author or the book before. It's definitely had a strong premise to me. There were quite a few themes, ideas, etc. at play here, all of which are explored with a real human touch. Learning to understand and deal with your emotions is a big one. This is Lily's main issue throughout it, and is written in a very relatable way, I think. Certainly relatable to me. Understanding your own strengths is definitely another biggie, and indeed, that you have hidden strengths even is another theme that's explored through Lily's kind of character arc. She struggles for a lot of the book with the fact that she's different, that she feels kind of less than in some ways in comparison to the other kids on the rig, certainly in terms of communication, things like that. But when the shit hits the fan, so to speak, she's the one that acts, and she's the one who finds a way to kind of save the community on board with some assistance, with some encouragement from a couple of characters, but she does have to step up. She realizes her difference and, her ability to communicate with this entity, this life form, and how its confusion about its own thoughts and emotions kind of mirrors hers. Proves to be her greatest strength. And communication, as I say, that is a biggie. I can't go into too much detail without spoiling stuff, but the way that Connors talks about different communication methods between humans, machines, other biological entities, shall we say, is really thought-provoking and relatable. I've mentioned already that there are questions asked about like the nature of consciousness. I found that particularly interesting, and also ethics as well. There are ethical questions that come into play here as well, with questions about kind of research versus resources, and I think Connors certainly alludes to his perspective on some of these things, but is really asking the reader to consider their own position on some of these bigger questions. I think this is a good example of YA sci-fi, although it definitely mixes other genres in with it. So you've got action and adventure and thriller in with that genre, but altogether it comes together and creates a really compelling and interesting story. So my score for ideas is 8 out of 10. So great. And then finally, my overall enjoyment, my general, kind of subjective emotional response to this. I really enjoyed this read. Yeah. Apart from the slight pacing drop off in the first half, which, as I say, was very small. I think it was like a couple of short chapters at the most. My enjoyment was generally consistent throughout. It was definitely an intriguing read. And it ramped up to a thrilling read in the latter quarter, without a doubt. In fact, I sat down to read it one evening, and I'd got about 200 pages left of the 400 pages that it is. It's pretty much 400 pages. And so I thought I'll read that last 200 pages in 2 sittings, over 2 nights. But I couldn't stop reading and finished it all in the one sitting. I didn't want to go to bed with it unfinished. I needed to know what happened. It ramped up and I was kind of in it, and it was thrilling and it was exciting, and I wanted to get to the end of it. And that's always a good sign. So yeah, my score for enjoyment is 8 out of 10. It was great. So overall score then, I will bob up the category scores on this side of the screen. And so, yeah, if we add all of those up and then divide by 6, we get our overall score, which is 7.5 out of 10, which equates, for those who like star ratings, which equates to, I think, probably a 4-star, I would say, probably a 4-star rating, this. That's probably what I'll put it on Storygraph as, in terms of star ratings. I honestly think this one deserves a little bit more love. I think it came out in February 2023. It's definitely worth a read. I've just not really heard anybody talk about it on BookTube, and there are a few reviews out there online, but and it's good. They're good reviews. I just don't see it mentioned much. It's fun. It's funny. It's thrilling. It's emotional. It's got plenty to say, I think, and it gave me my fix of deep sea intrigue for the month as well. So that's all good. So there we go, folks. Those are my thoughts on The Girl Who Broke the Sea by A. Connors. That's book number 2 in my science fiction for the Somewhat Hesitant project. So next month then, yes, we are starting on the first big block of classic sci-fi reads, which is the ABCs of science fiction. And February will see me reading Foundation by Isaac Asimov and Childhood's End by Arthur C. Clarke. If you want to read either of those books with me, then please do. I'll be chatting about my progress, etc. on Discord, so if you want to join us there, then follow the link in the description to my Discord server, and you can join in the discussion over there. So that is it from me today, folks. Thank you very much for watching, as always. If you've read The Girl Who Broke the Sea, do let me know in the comments what you thought of it. Or if you haven't read it and you might be picking it up now, you've heard me talk about it, let me know that too. I hope to see you back here again soon for more bookish ramblings. My next video will be out on Sunday, where I will be going through my TBR for February. So hopefully you will join me then for that. But from me, for now, that's ta-ra.